Hollywood has always been a place where legends are made, broken, and occasionally collide with one another in ways that nobody sees coming. But every now and then, a story surfaces from beneath the golden surface of Tinseltown that reveals something raw, something real, something that the carefully constructed world of publicity and press junkets was never meant to let out. This is one of those stories. Steve Reeves. The name alone conjures an image so vivid it almost feels mythological. Broad shoulders, a jawline like a cliff face, arms that looked like they were borrowed from a Greek statue. He was, by almost any measure, one of the most physically extraordinary human beings ever to walk into a film studio. And yet, for all his glory on screen and all his quiet dignity off it, there was one name that could visibly darken his mood. One name that, according to people who knew him personally, he could barely bring himself to speak without a flicker of genuine contempt crossing that otherwise composed face. Raymond Burr. For decades, the nature of that animosity remained buried under careful interviews, diplomatic silences, and the general tendency of old Hollywood to keep its uglier truths locked away in back rooms. But time has a way of loosening the grip on secrets. And now, piecing together accounts from people who were there, from the historical record of both men's careers, and from the cultural forces that shaped their very different trajectories, we can finally tell this story properly. By the time you finish reading this, you will understand not just what happened between these two men, but why it mattered so deeply to each of them. To understand a hatred, you first have to understand the man who carried it. Steve Reeves was born on January 21st, 1926, in Glasgow, Montana, a remote, frostbitten town sitting just shy of the Canadian border. It was the kind of place where the land was hard, the winters were punishing, and people learned early on that sentiment was a luxury you could rarely afford. He never really got the chance to know his father, Lester Del Reeves, who was killed in a farming accident when Steve was barely 6 months old. That absence shaped him in ways that would become apparent only gradually, over a lifetime of choices that consistently favored self-reliance over dependence, discipline over comfort, and authenticity over performance. His mother, Goldie, was the steady force in his early life. When the family relocated to Oakland, California, during Steve's childhood, it opened a new chapter. California was a different world from Montana, louder, sunnier, full of possibility. And Goldie, ever attentive, noticed early on that her son had a tendency to slouch, perhaps the physical manifestation of a boy carrying invisible weight. Her solution was practical and, by modern standards, amusingly old-fashioned. She had him wear shoulder braces that dug into his skin every time he hunched over. The lesson was swift and lasting. Stand tall. Always stand tall. That instinct toward physical discipline found its true direction during a summer visit to a ranch belonging to one of his mother's friends. There, a man named Vernon Hall was splitting logs shirtless in the afternoon sun, and the young Steve Reeves simply could not look away. Hall's body was extraordinary, a living demonstration of what human physicality could become through consistent labor. Something shifted in the boy watching from a distance. A door opened in his mind that would never fully close again. He began finding small ways to push himself. On his paper route through the Oakland Hills, while other boys walked their bicycles up the steep inclines, Steve pedaled. It sounded like a small thing, but that mentality, the deliberate choice of the harder path when an easier one was available, would define everything that came afterward. Then came World War II, and Steve, like millions of young American men, put whatever personal dreams he was nurturing on hold to serve. He enlisted right after high school graduation, reported for duty at the Presidio of Monterey in September 1944, and was eventually shipped to the Philippines. He fought in Mindanao and later in Luzon, including the brutal engagement at Balit Pass, where he contracted a severe combination of malaria and jungle fever that landed him in a military hospital in Manila for weeks. The war took the boy from Montana and returned someone considerably harder. He was discharged in September 1946 after more than 2 years of service, and what came back was not quite the same person who had left. But the fire for bodybuilding, far from being extinguished by everything he had endured, burned brighter than ever. Back in Oakland, he connected with Ed Yerrick, a respected bodybuilding coach who became something close to a surrogate father figure. When Reeves first walked into Yerrick's gym, he stood 6 feet tall, but weighed only around 163 pounds. Within 4 months of rigorous, full-body training, he had gained 30 pounds of pure muscle. His mother, as always, was part of the support structure, monitoring his nutrition with simple, whole food principles that emphasized vegetables, lean meats, and fruit. Nothing exotic, nothing synthetic, just discipline applied consistently over time. By 1946, he entered his first physique competition, the Mr. Pacific Coast, and won with relative ease. What followed was one of the most dominant competitive runs in the history of the sport. Mr. Pacific Coast again in 1947, Mr. America that same year, Mr. World in 1948, and then, in 1950, the crown jewel of the era, Mr. Universe, claimed in a head-to-head battle with the legendary British bodybuilder Reg Park. He won every major title available before the Mr. Olympia competition even existed. And then, in a move that stunned everyone around him, the very night after winning Mr. Universe, he announced his retirement from competitive bodybuilding. He was 25 years old, standing at the absolute summit of his sport, and he simply walked away. Not because he was forced to, not because of injury or controversy, but because he had proven what he set out to prove. The decision said everything about who Steve Reeves was at his core. He was not chasing applause. He was chasing something internal, something that had nothing to do with trophies or the admiration of crowds. With his bodybuilding career deliberately and gracefully concluded, Reeves set his sights on Hollywood. The transition made a certain obvious sense. He had a face that the camera loved, a physique that no special effects budget could replicate, and a natural charisma that translated effortlessly to screen. Producers noticed almost immediately. Even a legendary Cecil B. DeMille had his eye on Reeves for the lead role in Samson and Delilah. The offer must have been thrilling until the condition attached to it was revealed. DeMille wanted Reeves to lose 15 pounds of muscle. The reasoning, presumably, was some studio calculation about what audiences would find palatable or what the wardrobe department could accommodate. Whatever the logic, Reeves rejected the offer without apparent hesitation. He had built that body through years of genuine sacrifice and disciplined living. He was not going to dismantle it to satisfy someone else's aesthetic preference, not even for a major studio picture directed by one of Hollywood's most powerful men. That refusal tells you something essential about the man. He was not desperate. He was not going to compromise his values for a role, any role. Integrity, for Steve Reeves, was not negotiable. He found his footing in smaller productions first, including a minor role in director Ed Wood's 1954 film Jailbait, notable primarily because it is one of the rare instances where audiences can hear his natural speaking voice. His foreign films, which would come to dominate his career, were typically dubbed into multiple languages, meaning that the voice most international audiences associated with Steve Reeves was not actually his own. There is something quietly poignant about that detail. This man of absolute authenticity, literally voiceless in a medium that made him famous. He also appeared in the MGM musical Athena in 1954, playing the love interest of Jane Powell, and made television appearances on programs, including The Ray Bolger Show and The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show. These were not the roles that would define him, but they were the necessary steps on the path to what was coming. And it was during this period of early television work, before the European adventure that would transform his career entirely, that Steve Reeves first shared a set with Raymond Burr. The production was called Prison Doctor, a pilot made for review productions around 1950. In the larger sweep of entertainment history, it would be a footnote, except for what it represented and who was in it. Steve Reeves appeared in the pilot looking, by all accounts, every inch the physical ideal he embodied, golden, powerful, and composed in the way that only someone genuinely comfortable in their own skin can be. Raymond Burr played a gangster confined to a wheelchair, a role that, with the benefit of historical hindsight, feels almost eerily prophetic of the wheelchair-bound police consultant he would later portray in the long-running television series Ironside. Burr was intense, as he always was, projecting that particular quality of brooding intelligence that would eventually make Perry Mason one of the most watched programs in American television history. On paper, they were simply two actors doing a job on a small production that may or may not amount to anything. But those who were present remember the atmosphere between them as something less than comfortable. Actor Rhodes Reason, who had the opportunity to work with both men at various points in their careers, later reflected on that pilot and the dynamic it contained. His account, pieced together from later interviews, described a palpable tension between the two men, not explosive or dramatic, but persistent. The kind of friction that exists when two people occupy the same physical space, but seem to be operating from entirely different internal worlds. Part of this was simply a matter of fundamental incompatibility. These were two men shaped by radically different philosophies about what it meant to live and work with integrity. Reeves was at his core a literalist. What you saw was what you got. His body was real. His values were stated plainly and lived consistently. He trained without chemical assistance at a time when that was beginning to become the exception rather than the rule in competitive bodybuilding. He turned down enormous professional opportunities rather than compromise his principles. He was, in the truest sense, the same person in private that he presented in public. Burr, by contrast, was a man whose entire professional existence was built around transformation and concealment.